Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're really diving deep, going to get into the nitty-gritty of prepping for an electrical equipment inspector interview.
Yeah, it's a big one.
It is a big one, and we've got like some really awesome resources to help you guys out there stand out from the crowd. We're
Absolutely.
talking a full career guide. We've got sample interview questions.
hmm
So to help us unpack all of this, we got an expert in the electrical field, someone who's also got a knack for coaching people to interview success.
Shy.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah.
So before we get into like the hardcore questions, can you just paint a picture for our listeners? What does an electrical equipment inspector actually do? What's a day in the life like?
Well, every day is different, which I think is part of the
Okay.
fun. But you're gonna be in a factory or production facility a lot of the time, right? So you can picture, maybe not the quietest of office environments.
No. Yeah.
Definitely not. There's gonna be noise, probably a bit of dust flying around, definitely some inherent risks given that you're working with electrical equipment.
Totally. Total.
You're going to be the
Yeah.
one making sure that faulty wiring, defective parts, all those things that could be a safety hazard, that they never actually reach the consumer.
Right. You are that last line of defense, basically.
Exactly.
And it's interesting you mentioned the work environment because I did want to touch on that. Our career guide actually goes into some detail about that.
Yeah, it's not for everyone.
No, it's not. I mean, they highlight that, like you said, factories, production facilities, noise, dust, the potential electrical hazards.
Right. Safety is paramount. That's something you have to be really, really conscious of in this role.
Right. It's not just about knowing your stuff. It's about like living and breathing that safety first mentality.
100%.
Okay, so I think we've set the scene pretty well. Now let's get into the meat of it, those interview questions. Are you ready to dive in?
Let's do it.
All right. Question one. What motivated you to become an electrical equipment inspector? So my first thought is, this is your chance to show them you're not just there for any job.
Totally. They want to see some passion.
Right.
This is where you connect the dots for them. Did you love taking apart radios as a kid? Were you fascinated by circuits in school?
Okay, so like instead of saying, I'm good at spotting details, which, let's be real, anyone can say that.
Right.
You could say something like, my fascination for understanding how things work, combined with my meticulous nature, that's what led me to this field.
I like it.
Ensuring the safety of electrical equipment is not just a job for me, it's about protecting people.
Now you're speaking their language.
Okay.
Oh.
So how about what kind of follow-up questions could they ask based on that? Because, interviews are like a conversation.
Oh, for sure. They might ask about hobbies that relate to the field. Or, tell me about a time you had to troubleshoot an electrical problem. Something to see if you can think on your feet.
Okay, great. So question two. All right, question two. What are some of the key skills required for an electrical equipment inspector? So it's tempting to just rattle off keywords from the job description, like detail-oriented or problem solver.
Yeah, but they want to see you go deeper than that.
Right. So what are they really looking for here?
They want to know that you understand how those skills actually apply on the job. It's one thing to say you're detail-oriented, but can you give an example of how that plays out in the field?
Okay, so like using a specific example.
Yeah, exactly. So instead of just saying, I'm detail-oriented, you could say, my attention to detail allows me to identify potential issues early on, like using a thermal imager to spot overheating components in a panel.
Oh, that's good. Because you're not just saying you have the skill, you're showing them how you use it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you're also highlighting that you understand the importance of using specific tools and technologies.
Right. It shows them you're not just like theoretically good at this. You're actually out there, you know what you're doing. Okay, this is where a tool like RoleCatcher would be super handy. Have you used RoleCatcher before?
Oh, absolutely. It's a game changer, especially for interview prep.
So for our listeners who maybe haven't jumped on the RoleCatcher train yet, tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. So with RoleCatcher, you can actually input the job description, like the exact one you're applying for.
Okay.
And their AI will analyze your answers to the interview questions and give you feedback on whether you're hitting the right notes.
So it's not just like general interview advice, it's tailored to that specific role.
Exactly. That's what makes it so powerful. It's all data-driven. It's like having a personal interview coach in your pocket, helping you fine-tune your answers, making sure you're highlighting the skills that matter most to that employer.
It's like that extra boost of confidence, going in there, knowing that you've prepped with the best.
100%. Preparation is key, and RoleCatcher takes it to a whole other level.
Totally. Okay, ready for question three.
Hit me.
Can you explain how you would perform an electrical equipment inspection? This one seems like a big one.
It is a big one. Yeah, this is where your technical knowledge really comes into play. They want to know that you understand the process from start to finish.
So it's not enough to just say, I'd look for defects.
No, no, no. You got to walk them through it step by step.
Okay, so like give me an example. Let's say you're inspecting a motor control center. What would you do?
All right, so first things first, safety. You de-energize the equipment, make sure it's completely isolated. Then you do a visual inspection, looking for any signs of damage, loose connections, anything that looks off. And then you bring in the tools.
The tools, yeah, because we've got to get specific here.
Exactly. You'd use a multimeter to check for continuity and insulation resistance in the wiring. And, of course, a thermal imager to identify any hotspots that could indicate potential problems.
So you're painting a picture for them, showing them you know exactly what to look for and how to use the equipment.
Precisely. It's all about demonstrating that you can approach the inspection systematically, safely, and with a keen eye for detail.
Okay, now our career guide mentions that safety standards and regulations are super crucial in this field. I bet our next question touches on that.
You're probably right. It's not just about finding the problems. It's about understanding the why behind the regulations, the consequences of non-compliance.
Exactly. So, question 4. How do you ensure that your inspections comply with relevant safety standards and regulations? What's the best way to approach this one?
Well, you want to show them that you're not just checking boxes, you understand the gravity of what you're doing. Mention specific organizations or guidelines. For example, you could say, I ensure compliance with the latest edition of the National Electrical Code, paying close attention to grounding and bonding requirements, which are critical for preventing electrical shocks.
Okay, so you're naming names, showing them you know your stuff.
Exactly. You want them to know that you take compliance seriously, that you're up to date on the latest standards, and that you understand the importance of following them to the letter.
No cutting corners.
Absolutely not. Safety is non-negotiable.
And speaking of not cutting corners, I'm curious about how to handle the pressure of multiple inspections. Like what happens when you've got a million things on your plate? How do you prioritize?
That's a great question. It's about organization and staying calm under pressure. And that brings us to question 5. How do you prioritize your workload when dealing with multiple inspections?
Okay, so let's say I'm a total list person. I thrive on organization. Can I mention that?
Absolutely. Tell them about your process. Do you use a digital calendar, a color-coded spreadsheet, whatever works for you?
I love it.
The key is to demonstrate that you have a system for managing your workload and that you can prioritize tasks based on their urgency and importance. You could say something like, I prioritize inspections based on the equipment's criticality, any associated safety risks, and the production schedule. I use a digital calendar and a prioritized to-do list to stay organized and on track.
Being organized is key. But I imagine things don't always go according to plan. What happens when, despite your best efforts, equipment fails to meet those safety standards? That's got to be a tricky situation.
You're right, it can be. And that leads us perfectly to question 6. How do you handle situations where equipment fails to meet safety standards?
Okay, so this is where it gets really real.
It does, because now you're not just identifying defects, you're advocating for safety. You might have to make some tough calls.
Right, because you might have to say, hey, this is a safety hazard. We need to shut this down. And that might not go over well with everyone.
Exactly. So you need to be clear and firm about safety, but also diplomatic and collaborative.
It's like finding that balance, right? Because you don't want to be the safety police, but you also can't compromise on safety.
Exactly. You have to be able to explain the risks in a way that everyone understands and get them on board with finding a solution.
Yeah, so how would you actually approach it? Like, what would you say?
Right, because it's not just about saying, hey, this is a safety hazard, shut it down.
Yeah.
There's a diplomacy element involved here, right?
For sure, for sure. You want to be really clear about the safety concern, but also you got to be diplomatic. You're working with a team here. So you could say something like, I've documented the issue, took some pictures, made some detailed notes.
Okay, so you're showing them you've done your due diligence.
Exactly. You're not just like winging it. And then you'd say something like, I want to share my findings with everyone involved.
Yeah.
The production supervisor, the quality control manager, explain the risks, the non-compliance issues.
So you're being proactive, keeping everyone in the loop. Right, exactly. And then the most important part is you want to be a part of the solution. So you could add, I'd like to work with the team to figure out a solution, maybe repairing the equipment or finding a temporary alternative, but obviously without compromising safety standards.
So you're showing them that you're a team player. You're not just there to point fingers. You're there to get the job done safely. That's really key.
That's the key.
Okay, speaking of getting the job done, accurate documentation is huge in this role, right?
Oh, it's essential. Your reports are everything.
And that takes us to question 7. How do you ensure that your inspection reports are accurate and complete? So this is where my inner perfectionist would come out, but I'm guessing they want more than just, I'm really good at checking my work.
Right. They want to hear about your process, Are you double-checking your measurements?
Right.
Cross-referencing with manuals?
Give me an example of what a good answer would sound like.
Sure. You could say something like, I use a standardized template for all my reports, so everything is consistent and complete. I always double-check my measurements, make sure everything lines up with the equipment manuals and specifications.
Okay, so you've got a system. You're not just relying on memory.
Exactly.
Because let's be real, nobody's perfect, right?
Yeah.
What if you, despite your best efforts, you discover an error in a report you've already submitted?
Oh, that's a tough one.
It happens.
It does happen.
So how do you handle that?
Honesty is the best policy. You own up to it immediately. You could say, look, I found an error in my report, and I've already notified the relevant parties, and I'm working on issuing a corrected report as soon as possible. And you explain the error, how you're going to fix it. That shows a lot of integrity.
Totally. It's about taking responsibility.
Exactly. And being transparent. Those are important qualities in any job, but especially in a field like this where safety is paramount.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of staying up to date on safety standards and regulations, but the electrical field is constantly evolving. New technologies are emerging all the time. How does an electrical equipment inspector stay ahead of the curve?
Yeah, that's so important. Continuous learning is key in this field. You got to stay curious.
And I bet that's our next question. Question 8. How do you stay up to date with new technologies and trends in the electrical equipment inspection industry? Okay, so it's not just about, reading the manual once and calling it a day. What are some resources that you recommend for someone who really wants to stay on top of their game?
Well, for starters, join professional organizations. The International Association of Electrical Inspectors, or IAEI, is a great one.
Okay, so networking is key.
Totally. And they have amazing conferences, webinars. You can even get certifications or shows potential employers that you're serious about your career.
It's like investing in yourself, really.
Absolutely. The National Fire Protection Association, or NFPA, is another good one to check out.
Okay, so we've got networking, we've got professional development. What about just staying informed on a day-to-day basis? Are there any publications or websites that you recommend?
Oh, tons. You could check out Electrical Contractor Magazine or the NFPA Journal.
Great resources, so make sure to link those in the show notes for our listeners. Okay, ready for our final question?
Bring it on.
All right. How do you handle situations where you need to make a recommendation that may be unpopular with stakeholders? This one feels like it could be a real curveball.
It definitely can, because let's face it, safety isn't always everyone's top priority, especially when it comes to budgets and deadlines.
Right. It's that classic dilemma. So how do you navigate that? How do you stand your ground without, being disrespectful?
Well, first, you got to make sure your recommendation is rock solid. Back it up with the safety standards, the regulations, the hard facts.
Be data-driven.
Exactly. Don't just say, I think this is dangerous. Say, according to Section X of the NEC code, this poses a serious risk. Then you present it clearly, calmly. Make sure you're listening to their concerns.
Okay, so active listening is important here.
Really important, because you might find some common ground. Maybe there's a compromise or a phased approach that addresses both safety and their concerns. You want to be a problem solver, not a roadblock.
That's a great point. And this is another area where a tool like RoleCatcher could be super helpful, right?
Totally. You can practice those tough conversations with the AI, get feedback on your tone, your delivery. It can really boost your confidence.
Yeah, because sometimes it's not just what you say, but how you say it.
Exactly.
Well, this has been incredibly insightful.
Yeah.
I feel like I could ace an electrical equipment inspector interview now, and I'm not even applying.
There you go, see?
Seriously, though, for our listeners out there who are prepping for this kind of interview, I hope this has been helpful. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the technical aspects of the job to those all-important interpersonal skills.
It's all connected.
It really is. And remember, preparation is key. The more you know about the role, the company, the industry, and the more you practice your answers, the more confident you'll feel walking into that interview room.
Confidence is key.
It really is. And don't forget about those amazing resources we've mentioned. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to everything, including that career guide and RoleCatcher, which, let's be real, sound like a game changer for interview prep.
It is.
And that's a wrap on another deep dive. We hope you've enjoyed this episode and feel empowered to take that next step in your career journey. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next episode, where we'll be exploring another exciting career path. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.